Okay, I believe everything is set up now. Should be pretty good. I think so. No issues there. Alright, and straight to this. Alright, I think we're all set. Got that down? Yep. Alright, we are here today with some 40k Warhammer, more lore. And the lore is pretty deep in this universe. I mean, I've seen some cuckoo lore before, but 40k really likes to push the boundaries on dark fantasy. But more or less, it's no different from a Souls series. Souls are dark, but this is much darker. All hope just destroyed, 24/7.
Another millennium, another catastrophic invasion of Imperial space. In the first year of M39, Abaddon the Despoiler visited new darkness on the empire he had once helped create.
Boy, Abaddon just... I'll give him this. He doesn't give up, despite the numerous amount of failures. But apparently, Nurgle must really like him.
This time, however, he would not be alone in his incursion. This time he would be seconded, some would say led, by arguably the greatest military mind of the Chaos Forces. From the depths of the Eye of Terror, a million formless mouths screamed in unholy praise. The skies above Cadia darkened. All across Segmentum Obscurus, unprecedented waves of mutant births were recorded, as countless Psykers inexplicably took their own lives. The 10th Black Crusade had come, and this time, a son of the Emperor would take to the field. For the first time since the Horus Heresy, Primarch Perturabo would lead his Iron Fourth across the stars. The 4th Legion, known as the Iron Warriors, had once been the Emperor's finest siege specialists. No bastion, besides the Imperial Palace itself, had resisted
then they
their
went to
merciless
chaos.
brand of grinding
That's
warfare.
wonderful.
No other legion, save perhaps Mortarian's 14th, could match the Iron Warriors' capacity for sacrifice and suffering. Unlike most of his traitor brothers, Perturabo had managed to retain control of his legion.
It's weird to me how the Iron Warriors so easily fell to chaos more than any other group. It was almost like, we've been fighting it for so long. You know what? Let's just join it.
Throughout the horrors of the Horus Heresy, and even beyond, the Iron Warriors were thus spared the chaotic excesses that saw so many of their comrades' legions implode. They had remained a largely unified and cohesive force, a mighty legion rather than a petty warband. Through their Primarch's ruthless disciplinary actions, they had retained the rarest thing to find beyond the immaterial veil: order and discipline. Yet
Among
despite
chaos?
their formidable strength, they had played little to no role in the power plays of the Eye of Terror. Mighty Perturabo, once Horus's spearhead against the Loyalist forces, had grown disillusioned by the many betrayals and slights he had suffered from his traitorous brothers. He had betrayed his oaths to the Emperor because he felt unappreciated and exploited, only to discover that his fallen brothers also saw him as an expendable pawn. Thus, he abandoned the Great Heresy and sequestered himself in his fortress world of Medrengard, nurturing old wounds and letting his millennia of bitterness consume him. Few men, loyalists or traitors,
Sounds like he's
had
just
seen him
very
since.
angry.
Rumors circulated that the fallen Primarch had been elevated to the status of a mighty demon prince, like Fulgrim, Lorgar, or Angron. This came as a surprise to many, for Perturabo's disdain of chaotic corruption was well known. One thing was for certain: at the dawn of the 39th millennium, one of the Emperor's most lethal fallen sons would raise his fist against his father's realm once again. It is not known who made the first overtures between Abaddon and Perturabo. Some Imperial historians argue that stepping foot uninvited on Medrengard would be a lethal mistake, even for the War Master of Chaos. Others, however, contend that a Primarch...
Personally, Abaddon just fails at everything he does. His successes are usually because of insane luck.
As proud and bitter as Perturabo, would never abase himself by soliciting the help of a mere Astartes. Regardless of who made the first move, the Chaos leaders met, and against all odds, their discussions bore fruit. Abaddon, ever the diplomat by Chaos standards, knew how to find the chink in his uncle's mighty armor. The War Master had been Horus's right-hand man throughout the heresy, and had seen what tricks his father had used to ply the otherwise unbendable Lord of Iron. Abaddon thus promised the one thing Perturabo could not resist: vengeance over unsettled scores and slights. It was no secret that Perturabo loathed his brother Rogel Dawn and his Imperial fists more than any other in the galaxy. Yet that certainly did not mean the Primarch did not have room in his heart for more hatred. Among the countless targets of Perturabo's all-consuming bitterness, Abaddon centered on a common foe, the sons of the fallen Primarch Ferrus Manus, the Iron Hands. What scores Perturabo had to settle with the 10th Legion had been lost to time. No historiator or savant has been able to uncover the events that earned the Iron Hands the ire of the 4th Legion. Not even the Iron Hands librarians and chaplains have found a credible report of events that might have led to the 10th Black Crusade. Yet, with a Primarch as irascible
And yet somehow it happened.
petulant as Perturabo, it would be pointless even to attempt to find a rational answer. Despite his undeniable military brilliance, Perturabo had always had a volatile and petty temperament. As for Abaddon himself, it is more than likely he thought the Iron Hands a credible threat to his long war. The world of Medusa, which housed the chapter's fortress monastery, was a mighty bastion. He would need to study its defenses and probe its weaknesses if his long-laid plans were to have any hope of success. The War Master thus offered a fair and balanced bargain: aid in exchange for passage. Abaddon had seen how effective his 7th and 8th Black Crusades had been. On both occasions, the despoiler had managed.
I mean, crusades aren't really effective if you have to keep doing them over and over.
To circumvent the fortress world of Cadia and strike the soft underbelly of the Imperium with lethal success. The Loyalists, however, had gotten wise to his tactics. Countermeasures were surely in place, and the holy ordos of the Inquisition would not allow him to repeat his successful infiltrations. Abaddon needed a brilliant mind to get him to his target unopposed and unobstructed. In exchange for military assistance, Perturabo agreed to open an ancient warp route out of the Eye of Terror and carry the Black Legion across the stars and beyond the bulwark of Cadia. Yet, unlike the 7th and 8th Black Crusades, the Primarch would not use sorcery to breach the Imperial defenses. Ever a man of science and reason, Perturabo would use his skills as a craftsman and engineer to solve the problem as his hated father had before him. It had always been his greatest, most unrequited desire to build rather than destroy. The Emperor, however, had seen fit to make his brother Dawn the great architect of the Imperium, while he was relegated to be the great annihilator. How fitting, then, for him to use the skills his father had undervalued to strike at the Imperium. The Lord of Iron thus shackled together the tortured machine spirits of countless enslaved Mechanicus cogitators. After months of unrelenting effort, the Primarch finally managed to break through the esoteric wards and numerical defenses erected by the superstitious tech priests. Going further than any adept of Mars had ever dared, he tapped into the near-limitless potential that human archaeotech had to offer. A glimpse from the near-mythical dark age of technology. The mangled machine spirits, driven insane from Perturabo's desecration, toiled tirelessly.
Machine
Through their
spirits?
combined
Sure they weren't
processing
just
and the
organic
Lord
at
of
one
Iron's
point?
own inputs and knowledge, they succeeded in doing the impossible, calculating a stable and safe route through the impossibility of the Sea of Souls. Buoyed by Perturabo's dark science, the Black Legion and the Iron Warriors' fleets were carried across the veils of the Immaterium, past the defenses of Cadia, and deep into the Helican subsector. Imperial alarms were immediately sounded across the stars, all the way to the Imperial Palace of Terror.
That kind of
Petitions
technology,
that had taken
man.
centuries to reach the High Lords of Terror were put on pause and reshuffled into the limitless backlog. For the third time since the 37th millennium, Abaddon the Despoiler had bypassed the Cadian Gate. Finding themselves once again outmaneuvered, the notoriously sluggish Imperium struggled to muster a response. It was the great irony of the Emperor's mighty realm to have the greatest armies in the galaxy at their disposal while being unable to concentrate them or mobilize them in time. As ever, first response teams of Adeptus Astartes rushed to delay the War Master until the hammer of the Emperor could arrive en masse, yet they were too few to make a noticeable difference. Abaddon immediately employed the same strategies that had proven so effective countless times before. His captains and chieftains were given orders to disperse with their warbands and strike at targets of opportunity across the sector. Their goal was straightforward: cause as much damage as possible, both material and psychological, wherever they saw fit. These harassments would force any Imperial reinforcements to split their focus and fight on multiple fronts. They also wreaked havoc on Imperial logistics, food lines, and communications, rendering any coordinated Loyalist response even more difficult to organize. Lastly, the War Master tasked a sizable section of his fleet to strike against Thracian Primaris, the capital world of Helica. Losing this vital node of Imperial authority would plunge the subsector into an unrecoverable spiral of mayhem and chaos. The loss of centralized command in this region of space would see billions starve, revolt, or simply be cut off from any and all form of communication with the wider Imperium.
Iron.
Losing Thracian Primaris was simply not something the Emperor's faithful defenders could allow. With any luck, the Loyalists would thus be tricked into believing Abaddon himself was leading the detachment bound for the capital world. Meanwhile, the War Master and the Lord of Iron made for their real target, the world of Medusa, home of the Iron Hands chapter. Medusa was a feral world located near the Eye of Terror, on the outer reaches of Segmentum Obscurus. Its
Iron Warriors
landscape
and
was
Iron
defined
Hands.
by
How dare you
ceaseless
call yourself
geological
Iron?
activity. Vast mountain chains rose and fell within
And yet
generations,
iron's not even that
shaped by
hard of a
constant
metal compared to
tectonic
others.
movement. Volcanoes, geysers, and seismic disturbances made permanent settlement nearly impossible. The planet's climate was cold and severe, its skies thick with volcanic ash and cloud cover. Sunlight rarely pierced the gloom, casting the world in perpetual twilight. Glaciers advanced and retreated across the terrain, carving new valleys and burying old landmarks. Despite these hardships, some human tribes endured. Nomadic and resourceful, they adapted to the shifting terrain and harsh conditions, forming a culture that prized resilience and strength. It was from these people that the Iron Hands Space Marine chapter recruited its neophytes, seeing in them the same hardiness and discipline demanded by the world itself. Though unforgiving, Medusa played a central role in shaping the Iron Hands' character, austere, relentless,
Who's
and
the Primarch
unyielding
of the
in the
Iron
face of
Hands?
adversity.
Or they even have a
Aboard his
Primarch?
mighty flagship, once captained by Horus Lupercal himself, Abaddon watched as Perturabo led the assault against the Medusan system. The combined strength of the Iron Warriors and the Black Legion descended on the many outer bastions and fortifications of the Iron Hands. For the War Master, this was a
Again, I don't understand why they're not using aerial bombardment. I don't understand. They have the capacity to just drop bombs from space, but they don't. They just drop in more meat shields to get mowed down. I feel like 40k is like Russia. That's what it feels like. Keep throwing numbers at it. Something will give.
rare occurrence to watch and learn the art of war from a being even more exalted than he. True to form, Primarch Perturabo waged a war of attrition across the moons and planets of the Medusan system. Like a wrestler slowly working his way to a dominant position, the Lord of Iron slowly bent and battered his way to Medusa itself. This was a style of warfare that greatly benefited the Iron Warriors. The foremost siege experts of the Legiones Astartes, they had the means and the numbers to carry out such a costly campaign. The Iron Hands, however, did not. Reduced to a chapter of 1,000 Astartes after the heresy, they could not afford to fight in protracted sieges against 2 heretic legions. To make matters worse, the bulk of their chapter was scattered across the stars, pursuing campaigns in the name of the Imperium. It would take weeks for reinforcements to reach them. Their situation was grim, and the total annihilation of the Medusan system looked more than likely. Yet both the Lord of Iron and the War Master would soon come to learn that the scions of Theros Manus did not give up so easily. Even by Space Marine standards, the Iron Hands were notoriously implacable. While they were never as popular in Imperial legends and propaganda as the Noble Blood Angels or the vaunted Imperial Fists, no loyalist founding chapter carried as much hatred for the traitors as they did. Motivated by the tragic death of their beloved Genefather, the Iron Hands expunged all human weakness from their hearts and flesh. True to their own interpretation of Theros Manus' teachings, they replaced their weak human tissue with the cold certainty of steel. Now they were bedecked in cybernetic enhancements, and closer to emotionless automata than human beings. Thus they would meet Perturabo's Iron Warriors and grind them down with the methodical precision of the Blessed Machine. The Iron Council of Medusa decreed a state of total war. The ancient world-ending arsenal of their storied lineage would be brought to bear against the foe. No stone would be left unturned, no weapon left dormant. Ferocious war engines that had fought upon the blighted soils of Isfahan roared to life once more. Massive dreadnoughts, marred by the scars of countless battles, heaved their metal frames forward. In the deepest recesses of their fortress monastery, iron chaplains performed the sacred rites to awaken long-forgotten weapons and armor. These holy armaments, once wielded or crafted by the great Gorgon himself, were dragged from stasis.
You gotta be honest, dreadnoughts are awesome. Space Marines 2 made them so cool. Take me to the traitors. What? Damon, I cast you down. And then Titus's response, holy terror.
Their slumbering circuits hummed to life in anticipation of the impending battle. Their arcane mechanisms and lethal capabilities would serve the chapter once again, offering them the edge they so desperately needed. The walls of Medusa were reinforced by the Iron Hand's auxiliary forces. Chapter serfs were seconded to the front lines, alongside legions of battle servitors, living weapons in their own right. The servitors were mind-shackled to the will of the chapter. They would toil and fight without rest, maintaining the fortifications that dotted the system. Across every planet, every moon, and every orbital station, the Iron Hands evened the playing field with the implacable efficiency of a war machine that cared not for mercy or defeat. Each defensive line was strengthened, and each weapon system was primed and ready to deliver its deadly payload. Now, with their defenses bolstered and their forces gathered, the Iron Hands met the traitor legions upon every front. No part of their system was left untouched. Every inch of Medusa's fractured worlds became a battleground, a testament to their tenacity. They had faced extinction before, long ago, and had survived the weight of the heresy. And now, with their chapter's future hanging in the balance, they would face their final trial. If this were to be their end, it would not come without a fight. It would not come in obscurity or dishonor. The Iron Hands would make their last stand worthy of remembrance, an echo of their indomitable will that would reverberate across the galaxy, even in the face of overwhelming odds. Perturabo began his campaign with systematic precision, targeting the outer worlds of the system with cold mathematical cruelty. The Primarch struck like a hammer, in slow, measured swings. Orbital bombardments pulverized mountain ranges and shield domes, while siege engines advanced behind walls of smoke and debris. Planet by planet, bastion by bastion, loyalist defenses were tested and then broken. The defenders held as long as they could, often forced into brutal last stands within the craters of their own strongholds. These were not glorious deaths, but necessary ones. There was no retreat, only resistance, calculated in hours, not victories. The Iron Hands fought with controlled fury, executing tactical withdrawals only when every delaying measure had been exhausted. In many cases, they remained until structural collapse or orbital fire made further resistance impossible. Melter bombs were set to deny ground, and plasma cores were overloaded to deny capture. In this way, the outer system was sacrificed not out of weakness, but out of strategic necessity. For every hour gained, another company arrived from the void. For every position lost, another was fortified behind it. Though heavily outnumbered and
Feels like they were just playing
the Iron Hands
like I said, a war of attrition,
crucial time.
waiting
Their
for
delaying
reinforcements.
actions allowed supporting companies to regroup and reinforce key positions, ultimately preventing the total collapse of the system's inner defense ring. Dozens of strike cruisers, returning at maximum burn from distant campaigns, began to reassemble in high orbit over Medusa. What had begun as a retreat turned into a defensive realignment. The price, however, was steep. The many moons and planets of the Medusan system were rendered lifeless by orbital saturation. The mighty forges of the Iron Hands lay buried under tectonic upheaval. Scores of the chapter's tech marines, Iron Fathers, and Battle Brothers were lost. The chapter endured, but Perturabo had his revenge. Imperial reinforcements from the Astra Militarum and several Astartes chapters eventually arrived, translating into the system and making it ready for battle. Wave after wave of Imperial warships emerged from the warp, disgorging troops, armor, and materiel into the embattled system. Unlike the betrayal and abandonment suffered at Istvan V, this time the Iron Hands were not left to bleed alone. The dark memory of the drop site massacre had lingered in the chapter's collective memory like a thorn, but now, at last, the wider Imperium stood beside them. The arrival of these reinforcements shifted the balance. What had seemed an inevitable collapse became a grinding stalemate. Abaddon, ever the strategist, recognized the danger of overextending his forces. Perturabo, too, would not squander his warriors in a campaign that had lost its momentum. The siege was lifted, and one by one the fleets of the Iron Warriors and Black Legion withdrew, disappearing into the turbulent currents of the warp.
So that was the 10th Crusade, just an invasion of the Medusa system. They used a distraction to lure forces away, and then the real target was the Medusa system. But was their only goal just to instill chaos? Just seems kind of waste of time. I guess that's the nature of chaos.
Their holds full of spoils and trophies of war. Before retreating, however, the traitor forces had achieved more than simple devastation. They had mapped the defense grids of Medusa, studied the cadence of Iron Hand's deployment, and tested the limits of their endurance. Though the 10th Black Crusade had failed to annihilate the Iron Hands, Abaddon's reconnaissance by fire had knocked the proud chapter out of the long war for decades to come. In their withdrawal, they carried with them data and patterns, analysis and intent, the first strokes in a far larger campaign yet to come. Medusa had survived, but it had been seen, and the gaze of the eye would not forget. More videos on Abaddon and the Black Crusades are on the way. In the meantime, we're planning to cover the battles of many other fantasy, sci-fi, and space opera universes.
So the Iron Warriors are... they're allied with Chaos against the Imperium, but they don't deal with Chaos's possession and mutations. They just stay as they are while allying with Chaos. Makes me wonder what side of Chaos they pick, like which Chaos god. Was it Slanesh, Nurgle, the War Dude of Destruction? I don't know. I'm curious, because I find it strange that he's one of the last surviving Primarchs. He's on the side of Chaos, but he's blatantly kept to himself on his world. And I'm surprised he's not a prime target for, like, Gilliman to launch a campaign to take him out before he would become a problem.
So make sure you are subscribed and have pressed the bell button to see it. Please consider liking, commenting and sharing, it helps immensely. Our videos would be impossible without our kind patrons and YouTube channel members, whose ranks you can join via the links in the description to know our schedule, get early access to our videos, access our Discord, and much more. This is the Wizards and Warriors channel, and we will catch you on the next one.
All right. How Abaddon starved the Imperial War Machine. Boy, Abaddon is a reoccurring nightmare. He's not even a Primarch, from what I understand. He's just a standard Astartes.
It is the 37th millennium. Abaddon, Warmaster of Chaos, launches his 8th Black Crusade. His previous campaigns had been resounding successes. His goals had all been met. Great rivals had been crushed, irreplaceable Necron pylons destroyed, and key worlds weakened. His forces had scattered the Imperium's fleets and torn down bastion after bastion. The galaxy was reeling from the weight of his victories. Yet a warlord's work is never done. The anathema still sat upon his golden throne, his endless, lifeless gaze fixed upon the stars. Abaddon would not rest so long as the corpse emperor remained untoppled. And nor should you rest until you're done writing that story you've been mulling over. And for that, we bring you a special offer from our sponsor, World.
There's a new canon and lore that they brought out, which says something about the Grey Knights. I believe it's the Grey Knights serve to keep the Emperor on the golden throne. So should he ever resurrect, their job is to shove his ass right back there by order of his previous self. So any resurrection would be a new Emperor, not the same guy. Which is interesting, because I would find that weird that if he did come back, like, what would it change?
Anvil. World Anvil is a complete package for building creative
Personally, I think Games Workshop is dragging this out too long. They really need to advance the story. All of this is like, Emperor sit on throne, Emperor eat thousands of psychers daily. That's it. And instead of bringing him back, they're like, Grey Knights, the secret act that we've been keeping a secret for so long, is in fact keeping him there. Keeping him on the big old golden chair.
fiction projects, be it a novel, lore for a particular setting, or the many ins and outs of a tabletop adventure game. It's novel writing software, publishing software, database software, mapping software. It's the world you want to create software. Link your prose to a massive wiki-like encyclopedia of lore with locations, history, characters, items, all interconnected by World Anvil, not only to help you write, but to allow collaborators or admiring fans to come in and see the details of your world for themselves. Their manuscript creation process is quick to learn and extremely powerful. Never forget a detail and speed up the process to focus on the juicy parts of creativity. It's especially good if you want to write a scenario for tabletop gaming, as World Anvil supports all kinds of game system rules internally to run a campaign virtually and show players the details of the world they're in. We haven't even mentioned most of the tools World Anvil gives you, so check it all out at our link in the description. And as a bonus, if you use our code WIZARDS on their site, you'll get a full 51% off a yearly subscription to World Anvil. Use that and get started today.
A lot of mad customization websites.
Abaddon had unleashed upon
I don't mind them, they're perfect for tabletop.
Chaos had striven to ensure the favor of the Dark Pantheon. The blood god, Khorne, was well pleased with the carnage and slaughter accrued over the millennia. The jovial grandfather Nurgle had laughed heartily at the cursing of Corona during the Second Black Crusade. Even fickle Slanesh had been won over, seduced by the screams of the Valacian population as their bodies were torn asunder by perverse indulgences. But there was one god who remained distant, Tzeentch, the Changer of Ways. By far the most inscrutable and enigmatic of the Chaos gods, his favor was hard to gain and even easier to lose.
Honestly, based on what I know, Nurgle is the most powerful of the Chaos gods. He's the most known, I'll say that much, because his name's just so cool, Nurgle.
His schemes stretched across the web of time, and the complexity of his will was a puzzle that even Abaddon's greatest minds could not easily decipher. Yet the time had come for the War Master to make his bid. With the Great Four at his side and Draknien in his hand, nothing in the Imperium would stand in his way. Abaddon's soothsayers and warp scryers were put to work. These were not the petty cultists and lesser acolytes that whispered on the edges of reality, but powerful Astartes sorcerers, leaders in their own right, feared and respected by all who knew them. Yet even they were not prepared for what lay ahead. Many were lost in the attempt to divine the Wheel of Tzeentch. Those who dared peer too deeply into the warp were snuffed out like candles in the wind. The chaos
like
of
he's
the
a
immaterial
little
shattered
cranky for
even
a
their
chaos god.
transhuman minds, leaving them broken, trapped in endless cycles of incomprehensible visions. Their warp senses brushed against the infinite designs of the Changer of Ways, and the price was more than they could pay. Their minds could no longer distinguish between the past, present, and future. Every moment became a labyrinth, every choice an enigma without a solution. For every sorcerer who fell, another took their place, but even Abaddon's greatest psychers struggled to understand. Yet, despite the agony, a pattern began to emerge. A sequence, both numerical and esoteric, its repetition fainter than the ticking of a clock. These numbers held the key to the War Master's victory. The Wheel of Tzeentch was revealed as clearly as it ever could be. The Eighth Black Crusade was not to be a campaign of conquest. Tzeentch was not interested in the usual promises of blood and territory. This time, death would spread across the Imperium in a fractal bloom, an intricate and purposeful killing pattern that only the Changer of Ways could understand. The Eighth Black Crusade would not strike with the ferocity of a maddened ambull, nor with the cruel precision of a homunculus.
Back in time.
It would fall upon the Imperium seemingly at random, without warning, and with no clear purpose, beyond the execution of the numbers that had been revealed. Abaddon's forces struck across Segmentum Obscurus, attacking isolated settlements, orbital relay moons, pilgrim convoys, and forge worlds. The scale of the crusade was immense, but the logic behind the attacks was incomprehensible to Imperial minds. At first, there was no obvious pattern, no connection between the disparate targets. Unlike the previous crusades, where Abaddon had struck with ruthless efficiency and overwhelming force, this was different. The Black Legion did not follow through with their attacks. Key strategic positions were assaulted, only for the heretics to withdraw at the last moment, just before their enemies were shattered. Imperial forces, certain of their doom, reported inexplicable restraint from the Chaos forces. Garrisons prepared for the final battle, only for the Black Legion to retreat, leaving their would-be victims confused and uncertain of the true purpose of this campaign.
That would confuse the hell out of some people.
While strategic positions were left untouched, Other targets were savaged with genocidal thoroughness. Remote colonies, unimportant outposts, and small settlements were annihilated with brutal precision.
So is Abaddon's
Their
goal?
populations wiped out.
Is his goal to be similar to Horus and have 4 chaos gods inside of him?
In numbers that seemed arbitrary. A distant agricultural world might be spared, while a humble manufactorum was drowned in blood. In the eyes of Tzeentch, strategy was meaningless. The only thing that mattered was the sequence. The numbers were sacred, and every death had its place. The Imperial response was one of confusion and fear. The Emperor's most holy Inquisition began to mobilize, but they could not begin to guess where to start their investigation. In their panic, they spread themselves thin across every theater of the conflict, desperate to uncover the meaning behind these random slaughters. Abaddon had outfoxed them. Every attempt to strike back only seemed to bring more death, and yet the true purpose behind the killings remained elusive. The moons of Tychus were the first to bleed. In the grand scheme of things, these settlements were insignificant. They had endured the horrors of the Old Night and the Horus Heresy simply owing to their lack of strategic value. The 20 crater cities that scarred their frozen surface had survived for millennia, unnoticed and untouched. But on the day that Tzeentch's will was fulfilled, 8 of them were torn open, their domes shattered, and their atmospheres sucked into the void. The inhabitants were left to freeze mid-breath. The other 12 remained untouched, save for the cryptic symbols carved into their outer shells, visible even from orbit. A strange and foreboding message was being sent, one that none would understand until it was too late. It was here on Tychus that the first steps of the ritual were realized. Each crater city had been a node that, when combined with the others, would complete a sequence, a cosmic equation that could only be understood by Tzeentch. And so it was with each slaughter, each death, the greater pattern began to unfold. The Black Legion's forces moved like clockwork, cutting down the faithful and the innocents, leaving behind a trail of horror that made no sense to those who had not seen the primordial truth. Among the many victims of the Black Legion was the Divine Path, a pilgrim vessel bound for Holy Terror, carrying thousands of devout souls. Like millions of similar ships, the Divine Path had begun its journey decades before. Through the years, one generation of pilgrims replaced the other, only to be replaced in turn. From father to son, the burden was carried on, marked by the pilgrim tokens the parents would pass on to their children. They toiled and crewed their metal coffin with zeal, hoping that through their sacrifice, their offspring may one day gaze upon the throne world. For reasons barely known even to him, Tzeentch had marked this unremarkable vessel for slaughter. From its hull to its hab chapel, 999 of its passengers were ritually slain, in ascending order of the pilgrim tokens they wore. The rest were spared, left to mourn and to wonder why the wrath of chaos had fallen so mercilessly on such an unimportant vessel.
Tzeentch? I thought he hadn't contacted Abaddon. So he did, and now Abaddon's carrying out his will? Alright.
There was no why. There was only the number. As the bodies piled up and the galaxy reeled, the Ordo Malleus deployed Cypher Savant teams to analyze the growing number of killings. Dozens of Lex mechanics burned out their cortex implants trying to solve the mystery, but the truth was elusive. It took time, but the pattern was finally uncovered, a grand equation not composed of numbers but of corpses. The Skullgather, as historians would later name the Eighth Black Crusade, was not a campaign, it was a ritual designed to appease the Changer of Ways. The final stroke of the Skullgather came on the forge world of Rithkarn, a place once bustling with industry and innovation. But the world had long been in decay, its underclasses oppressed and abused. It was here, among the mutant workers who served in the manufactorums, that chaos truly began. Whispered words and warp-sent
chaos didn't begin sooner.
inspired a great uprising, and soon the dregs of Rithkarn had turned their tools against the tech priests who had long ruled over them. Abaddon's forces arrived to find the world already in turmoil. The Black Legion had not come to claim the vast industries of the Forge world. They had come to complete them. The High Council of Tech Magi, the architects of Rithkarn's great machines, were captured and sacrificed upon the anvil of their own creation. Their bodies were torn apart and fed into the gears they had served for centuries. Blood became lubricant, screams became the hymns of the Forge. In the molten heart of Rithkarn, the final piece of the ritual fell into place, and the grand equation was completed. With that final sacrifice, the construct nodes beneath Tychus ignited with warp fire. The forbidden structures that had been buried since the long night melted and twisted in shapes that defied all reason. The veil thinned, and Tzeentch was pleased. His ever-changing will had been fulfilled. For now. By the time the Inquisition identified the pattern, it was already too late. The crusade had ended. Abaddon had withdrawn. There were no victors, no spoils, only silence and the sickening stench of death. The Imperium was left to pick up the pieces, but they would never fully understand what had just transpired. Abaddon had sought the favor of Tzeentch, and in doing so, had unleashed a ritual so complex, so terrifying, that even the most learned minds could only tremble at the thought. The Eighth Black Crusade had culminated in yet another resounding victory for the War Master, solidifying his dominance. But
you can't call him dominance, because yes, he's achieving the goal he sets out each time for the crusade, but he's still retreating and falling back. He's a bandit. Just comes in, does some stuff, and leaves.
Even as the echoes of his triumph reverberated across the galaxy, Abaddon knew that the war was far from over. Half a millennium later, he would rise again, ready to unleash a new and even more devastating assault upon the Imperium. The Ninth Black Crusade, or the Starving of Cancephalus, marked a pivotal moment in Abaddon the Despoiler's relentless war against the Imperium. Launched in 537 M38 from the Eye of Terror, the Crusade sought to cripple one of the most vital Imperial Navy strongholds in the sector, the shipyards of Cancephalus. Abaddon's plan was deceptively simple, yet devastating in its execution. Recognizing that the shipyards relied heavily on the labor force of the nearby hive world of Anticanos IV, he decided to strike at the heart of this vital supply chain. By cutting off the labor, the Imperium's war machine would be stifled, and Cancephalus would fall silent. The assault on Anticanis would serve as a prelude to the broader devastation that was to come. The Anticanis massacre began with the swift arrival of Abaddon's Black Legion forces, supported by numerous Chaos allies. Abaddon made pacts with the World Eaters, the Word Bearers, the Purge, and the Apostles of Minth Ras, all of whom joined in the brutal onslaught.
Word Bearers refused to go away.
Decimated the orbital defenses of Anticanis, allowing for a bombardment of fusion bombs and vortex torpedoes that obliterated the planet's surface. Chaos Space Marines, brutal and relentless, descended upon the dying world, sweeping through the remains of the hives in a blood-drenched rampage. At the forefront of the assault was the demon prince Daleth, who spearheaded the attack on Monarchiv, the Imperial Governor's seat. For 16 days, Daleth and his demonic hordes ravaged the lower levels of the hive, slaughtering millions of refugees as they fled. The surviving inhabitants were captured and enslaved, herded back to the ships that would carry them away to an unknown fate. The Imperial response came swiftly, but not quickly enough. Astropaths broadcasted warnings.
The moment the aerial bombardments hit,
Silver Skulls chapter of the Space
I think that's pretty much it.
First, launching a series of hit-and-run attacks that sought to delay the Chaos forces. Yet Abaddon was a master of timing. He knew that the incoming Imperial reinforcements would spell the end of the massacre if they were not swiftly concluded, and he had no plans to meet them in person. Thus, the War Master led the final assault on Monarchiv himself, accompanied by his Black Legion Terminators. They tore through the defenders with brutal efficiency, massacring the Adeptus Arbites and the Planetary Defense Forces in a 2-day bloodbath. With the capital under his control, Abaddon had his forces kill or capture as many of the planet's population as possible, leaving only devastation in their wake. The old and the sick were put to the sword, while the rest were packed into slave ships bound for the Eye of Terror. As Imperial Guard regiments began to arrive in orbit, Abaddon's forces made their departure, slipping past the Imperial fleet and leaving chaos in their wake. The War Master did not bother to inform his allies about his redeployment. They were left stranded upon the world to bog down the Loyalists. With the bulk of the Imperial forces occupied on Anticanis, the Despoiler would be free to strike at Cancephalus. The Imperial forces that arrived to retake Anticanis found themselves embroiled in a grim war of attrition with Abaddon's unwilling rearguard. The stranded heretics fought with a ferocity and desperation fueled by Abaddon's betrayal. The Imperial Guard regiments, reinforced by elements of the Adeptus Astartes, attempted to rally against the Chaos forces left behind.
Why am I not
to delay
surprised?
their pursuit.
Chaos
However, the
abandoned
planet
chaos.
was already an inferno of devastation, its infrastructure shattered beyond repair. The planet's hives lay in ruin, its once thriving cities now charred skeletons, and the surviving population was reduced to little more than broken survivors or enslaved captives. Despite the Imperial forces' relentless efforts to reclaim Anticanis, the world was beyond saving. Its once vibrant ecosystems turned to barren wastelands, its people scattered or dead. Worse still, the Imperial Navy shipyards at Cancephalis, the lifeblood of the sector's naval defense, were rendered completely crippled. Starved of manpower thanks to Abaddon's deliberate strike at Anticanis, these vital shipyards lay dormant. They remained unable to repair or resupply the Imperial fleet. The loss of such a crucial resupply station crippled the Imperium's naval operations in the region, leaving the Imperium exposed to further Chaos incursions. With no immediate means of reinforcing or
I'm curious if Gilliman's back at this point acting as regent, because it's just weird to me how split up all the Primarch's different forces are. I mean, there's many different groups of Astartes, and they're all just acting in their own way, not as a cohesive unit. It's just so highly split up. And by the time reinforcements arrive, it's already too late. Every single time. Abaddon understands this, and he's been taking advantage of it.
resupplying, the Imperial Navy was left helpless, unable to respond to the growing threat of Chaos fleets emerging from the Eye of Terror. For the next 17 years, Abaddon's forces were free to wreak havoc across the sector, unchallenged and unopposed. His fleets, having evaded any meaningful resistance, raided Imperial outposts, destroyed supply lines, and ravaged the region at will. Whole systems fell under the sway of chaos as the Imperium struggled to recover from the crippling blow dealt by the Ninth Black Crusade. Throughout this period, the Imperium's attention was divided and resources stretched thin, unable to focus on the Eye of Terror's expanding reach. Abaddon's unrelenting campaign sowed discord and fear, his name whispered with terror
Such a
across
colorful
countless
universe.
worlds that now lay in the shadow of chaos. The devastation of Anticanis and Cancephalis was not merely a military loss, it was a symbol of the fragile nature of Imperial power, a stark reminder of how easily the Emperor's domains could be torn apart by the forces of chaos. The tally of the Ninth Black Crusade was grim. Billions had perished, including the brave Adeptus Astartes chapter of the Celestial Swords. The Lamentus chapter, spawned from the gene seed of Sanguinius, was also all but destroyed. They were saved only by the intervention of the Ultramarines and White Scars, who came to the rescue of their unfortunate cousins. Anticanis, reduced to a ruinous wasteland, would never recover from the horrors inflicted upon it, and the shipyards of Cancephalis would be rendered inoperable. The Ninth Black Crusade, though a savage blow to the Imperium, was but another chapter in the ongoing war between Chaos and the Emperor's realm. While Abaddon's forces had dealt a devastating blow, the Imperium's resolve remained unbroken, and the seeds of resistance were sown in the wake of such catastrophic losses. The Imperium, though wounded, would not forget the horrors of Cancephalis or the blood-soaked massacre of Anticanis. In time, new champions would rise to face the War Master once more, setting the stage for future conflicts that would continue to shape the fate of the galaxy. Yet for now, the Ninth Black Crusade stood as a testament to Abaddon's unyielding determination to dismantle the Imperium one world at a time. We will continue to cover Abaddon's gruesome exploits as this series goes on, so make sure you have subscribed
Good God,
and pressed
more
the
than
bell button.
gruesome. This guy is
Please consider
like
liking and sharing as it helps
relentless.
immensely, and don't forget to
I always
comment.
feel like he
We'll try
fails,
to
though,
read and
because he's not
respond to
really,
every comment,
you know,
as we want to know what you think about this
devastating.
video and which videos you hope
Oh,
to
well.
see in the future.
Abaddon's
This is the
Abaddon.
Resident Warriors channel, and we'll catch
He's
you
doing a
on the
better job
next
than
one.
Horus did. Ghost War. Another possible campaign, the 7th
The long
campaign.
war continues. Abaddon's crusade of deception and attrition is proceeding as planned. With the twisted meanders of warp time in his favor, the War Master prosecutes a patient campaign that will see the forces of chaos triumph sooner or later. Like a duelist landing blow after careful blow, the despoiler harasses the Imperial Juggernaut, looking for his moment to deliver the fatal strike. The records of the Terran Administratum, co-referenced by the Ministorum, and compiled within the sealed vaults of the Ordo Malleus, speak grimly of the war known among the ecclesiarchy as the Ghost War. its origins are shrouded in deceit and shadow, for such is the way of the archenemy, and such is the hand of Abaddon the Despoiler, War Master of Chaos and heir to Horus. If you feel like bringing utter despair and destruction to the galaxy, the best place to do so is on the tabletop, and the best place to get what you'll need is our sponsor ChePeku, who are offering their new complete
if you
fantasy
desire
bundle.
to cause
This is a
worldwide
discounted collection
ending,
of the
universal
tabletop
ending
fantasy gaming
destruction,
assets produced by ChePeku,
do it on the
combining
tabletop.
maps, scenes, and tokens. The stunning maps can be used as static images, but also feature animation and sounds when used in virtual tabletop programs, all of which work with ChePeku assets. There are more than 6,000 maps in the archive already, including sci-fi maps if you want to take your adventure right into 40k territory. The Scenes collection gives you thousands of backdrops for gameplay events, with variations for different times, moods, or themes. Tokens are a new system for easily portraying NPCs, monsters, or any actor in the world. There are loads of presets to use, you can customize them, or even generate tokens randomly to quickly bring out new characters or enemies. Every month, ChePeku releases 5 new maps, 5 new scenes, and more than 40 new tokens. To get them, plus the massive back catalogue, you used to need to buy 3 different subscriptions. But with the complete fantasy bundle offer, you need only pay for 2.
You'd have to buy 3 different subscriptions to get access to their previous backlog of maps? That's just silly. That's poor business practice. Bad business.
To get all 3. It's also much cheaper than their previous Patreon subscription method. It's the perfect time to bring their massive collection to your tabletop, or get some new material at a discount. Sign up at go.chepeku.com/wizards_warriors, link in the description. Whereas the 6th Black Crusade had been marked by open slaughter beneath a bloody sky, the 7th would be a war of silence and phantoms. The attack was launched in 811 M37.
So it's going in reverse
Across
because of the
Gothic sector and
playlist.
beyond,
Gotcha.
The Eye of Terror bled darkness into the stars. As they had done countless times before over the past millennia, the defenders of Segmentum Obscurus manned their battle stations. Every single fortress world, orbital defense station, and forward outpost was given the order to prepare for the fight of their lives.
Cadia,
Able-bodied
always on the
civilian
edge.
populations were pressed into militia regiments or logistic corps. The rest were evacuated or converted into servitors to prevent panic and warp corruption. Ministorum priests, attached to the Imperial Guard regiments, offered blessings and last rites to the men under their care. From the darkness of the void, the Emperor's angels of death descended in their hundreds to protect his domain. More than any other planet in the Segmentum, Cadia became a hive of frenzied activity. The time had come for a new generation of Cadian shock troops to hold the line and defend the Imperium from annihilation as their forefathers had done countless times before them. Yet, as the brave defenders of mankind peered into the cold emptiness of space, no fleet was seen crossing the accursed threshold of the Eye. For a time, all was suspiciously and unnervingly quiet. Millions of guardsmen clutched at their lasguns with trembling hands, waiting for a blow that refused to land. Taking example from the enigmatic Alpha Legion, Abaddon slipped past the bastions of Cadia like a wraith beneath a storm, unnoticed by augurs or astropaths. The seemingly impenetrable Imperial front line was entirely bypassed without a shot being fired.
Ow.
One can only imagine the horror of the Imperial defenders when their scans finally picked up the presence of the War Master so deep within their lines. No one knows what methods he made use of, but within a span of weeks, worlds were gone, entire systems were left silent, and their Vox networks were choked by static and screams. The High Lords of Terror were caught in a
Difference between Abaddon and Horus. Horus was trying to not wipe out the worlds, he was trying to take them. Abaddon don't give a crap what that world looks like or what's on it. He's just like, oh, bomb it. So he's doing what I'm saying, using aerial bombardments. Good on ya, Abaddon, good on ya.
web of paranoia, beset by conflicting reports and phantom signals. The Ghost War had begun. The scattered remnants of the fleets of Battlefleet Obscurus, tasked with guarding the unstable passages around the Eye, found themselves outmaneuvered at every juncture. Abaddon's fleets struck without warning at their rear, before vanishing back into the void.
With nukes.
On the volcanic death worlds of the Harness Collective, Abaddon's warriors descended like shadows birthed from the Immaterium itself. Clad in Baroque ceramite and trailing warp-tainted fumes, they shattered the great geothermal seals that caged the planet's molten fury. Scalding vapor, thick as smoke, surged through habdomes and manufactoria. Entire cities vanished beneath waves of superheated mist, leaving only warped skeletons and seas of blistered corpses. Vox operators choked on scalding air as emergency frequencies cackled with distorted screams before lapsing into hollow static. Millions perished unseen and unheard, their flesh sloughing from bone as their souls were wrenched screaming into the waiting maws of the war. Further rimward, the void stations of Neas, ancient bastions of the Adeptus Mechanicus, succumbed to brutal desecration. In the obsidian-shadowed corridors of Neas Prime, the heretics ransacked the sacred vaults, seizing Archaeotech relics and Xenotech curiosities hidden since the long night. Plasma welders carved through adamantium vaults, while dark magi of the Dark Mechanicum reveled in the profane rites that followed. The tech priests were butchered and left dangling from iron gantries. Their lifeless forms swayed like morbid censer bells, rusted augmetics etched with the sigils of the dark gods, still twitching with fading machine spirits corrupted beyond recovery. On Gyro's storm-racked oceans, the horrors deepened. Blood-maddened warbands, clad in brass-rimmed crimson, emerged from the maelstrom aboard vessels pulsing with Khorne's wrath. Amidst black squalls and tidal surges, renegade Astartes cast hundreds of silt miners into the abyss, where famished rift sharks tore them apart in feeding frenzies. Towering mining rigs were torn asunder, dragged beneath the waves by chains and harpoons, their skeletal remains jutting from the surf like the ribs of drowned leviathans. The oceans themselves became tainted, foaming red and black, as echoes of savage rites reverberated through the depths. Throughout these harrowing months, the Imperium flailed blindly, desperate to unmask the architects of this invisible war. Fleet masters of Battlefleet Obscurus deployed flare ships and auger relays, flooding the void with probes and vox incantations, yet only echoes and madness returned. Inquisitorial kill teams sent to recover survivors found only silent graveyards, drenched in blood and thick with the scent of ozone and burnt flesh. By the time the pattern emerged, it was far too late. Abaddon sought no singular fortress to topple, no grand bastion to storm. His ambition was a campaign of slaughter, a shadow war of bleeding cuts and poisoned wounds, designed to bleed Segmentum Obscurus dry, one blighted world at a time. Yet the traitor legions would not remain hidden forever. At Midian, beneath a blood-red sky, Abaddon revealed his hand in earnest. Deploying to halt Chaos advances, the Blood Angels were drawn into a brutal confrontation against the Black Legion and its warbands. Records are fragmentary, though one truth remains clear. Abaddon unleashed a fury reminiscent of his gene-sire Horus Lupercal. There, amidst shattered cathedrals and burning Prometheum fields, the sons of Sanguinius stood against the tide. Assault companies clashed against Khornite berserkers, their jump packs lighting the ash-choked skies. Devastator squads rained fire from crumbling bastions, but the berserkers could not be stemmed. From among them strode Abaddon himself, leading frenzied champions of the Skull Throne into the teeth of the Imperial defenses. The Canticle of Cassandria Lev speaks obliquely of salvation that came not from Terra nor Baal, but from the Outer Night. A grey-clad chapter of uncertain origin, their warships emerging from void darkness, fell upon the pursuing Black Legion. Some savants of the Ordo Astartes whisper that this was a rare intervention by the elusive Carcharodon's Astra. From the half-mythical writing of Saint Lev, Imperial scholars are told that these silent warriors fell upon the servants of the Skulled One with great fury from the darkness, unseen as the beast that lurks beneath the black waters. So were the remnants of the Blood Angels spared total annihilation on that day, and yet the Ghost War was not over. The final battle would be decided upon Makan, a dust-choked frontier world on the edge of oblivion. Its winds howled across barren plains, scouring the land with grit and ash. Settlers clung to existence, eking out their lives with meager dust mills that strained to draw even the slightest moisture from the atmosphere. The planet was a place where the sun never fully broke through the haze, and where the only respite came from the scarce and precious moments when the dust storms subsided. It was here, amidst the relentless dust and the ceaseless howling winds, that the war reached its grim crescendo. Determined to halt the advance of Abaddon's forces, the Blood Angels chapter descended upon Makan in full force. Every warrior, every tank, every drop pod was summoned to the battlefield. Reinforcements from the Rampagers chapter joined the fray, adding the cunning of the sons of Jagatai to the ferocity of the spawn of Sanguinius. The entire legacy of Baal stood firm against the Black Legion's encroaching might. The chronicles recount Reclusiarch Thalastian Jorus leading the Blood Angels in prayer, his voice raised above the howling storms of dust and flame that roared around them. He stood resolute, his Crozius raised high as battle brothers gathered in the sand, their armor pitted and scratched from previous engagements, but their resolve unbroken. Some claimed that the very winds were thick with the sorrow of the Imperium, as if the Emperor himself wept for those who would fall. The Black Legion struck with unholy precision.
I don't think the Emperor
Abaddon,
ever
towering
wept.
and black-clad in his Terminator
Unless he did
armor,
when he fought
led the
Horus.
charge with cold, brutal calculation. At his side, the Sorcerer Lord, Iskander Kion, unleashed the powers of the warp, twisting reality itself to his will, while the duelist, Telemachon Lyrus, danced through the battlefield, his blade flashing with deadly grace. They carved a bloody path through the Blood Angels, tearing through them with glee, their bolt of fire and chainswords unable to halt the onslaught. The forces of the Black Legion shattered the Blood Angels' ranks, tearing through their defensive lines like a tempest. Assault Marines, leaping into the fray with their jetpacks roaring, were torn apart mid-air, their bodies falling in mangled heaps of gore. Devastators, positioned to rain death upon the enemy, were crushed beneath the weight of demon-infested war engines, their weapons useless against the infernal tide that surged towards them. Even the mighty Blood Angels could not withstand the ferocity of the Black Legion. Captain Acreon stood at the front, his armor engraved with the symbols of his chapter's ancient victories as he led the charge against Abaddon's warbands. Their final confrontation would echo through the ages, a brutal reminder of the duel between the Angel and the fallen Warmaster Horus. Striking with all the fury of a battle brother who had lived through countless wars, Acreon clashed with Abaddon beneath the burning sky. The battle was swift and brutal, but in the end, it was Abaddon's blade that struck true. With a final fatal blow, the captain of the Blood Angels fell, his power sword clattering to the ground, his life extinguished in an instant. By the time the battle ended, Makan had become a wasteland. The sky was choked with ash, and the stench of death hung heavy in the air. The warriors of the Black Legion had left their mark upon the world, and the Blood Angels, though fierce, had fallen beneath the weight of their enemies' might. The plains were littered with the bodies of both sides, a grim testament to the carnage that had unfolded.
Man, how did the Blood Angels even
now
recover
heavy with
after
the stench
that?
of burnt flesh and shattered armor, carries the whispers of the fallen, lost forever to the brutal tide of war. Yet even in defeat, there was defiance. Days had passed since the battle's end, and the dust of Makan still clung to the air, heavy with the scent of burnt flesh and scorched earth. The Black Legion had desecrated the fallen, Blood Angels and heretics alike, leaving their broken bodies strewn across the land like discarded refuse. Where the blood of the faithful had once soaked the ground, now only ash remained. The sky itself had seemed to darken further, as though the very heavens mourned the loss. Yet even in this endless blackness, there was still a flicker of hope, a final act of defiance. Reclusiarch Thalastian Jorus, though gravely wounded and haunted by the madness of the Black Rage, had not fallen to despair. In the weeks after the carnage, as the traitors reveled in their victory and corrupted the dead, Jorus and a small cadre of his surviving brethren emerged from the endless wastelands, each clad in the black armor of the Death Company. Cloaked by the swirling dust storms and the cover of darkness, they advanced like wraiths, seeking a final vengeance against the heretic Warmaster. It was a testament to Jorus' skills as a warrior and leader that he managed to retain control of his insane brethren under such conditions. The tale of what transpired next has passed into whispered legend, shared only in hushed tones within chapels and librariums, for none who witnessed it fully understood the depths of the madness that drove these Astartes to such fury. It is said that Jorus and his warriors...
They watched nearly their entire chapter get wiped out. They had a reason.
whose minds were twisted by the curse of their Gene-Father's death, tore through Abaddon's personal honor guard with a fury that exceeded anything the heretics had ever seen. Fueled by an insatiable bloodlust, they became living embodiments of wrath, unrelenting and unstoppable. The very air seemed to tremble with each strike of their chainswords, as if even the planet itself recoiled from their anger. Amid the carnage, as Black Legionnaires fell before them like leaves, Jorus found himself face to face with Abaddon the Despoiler.
Of course he won't win.
In the heart of the battlefield, amid the ruins of Makan's shattered landmarks, that the final confrontation unfolded. The sky above was a tapestry of lightning and smoke, casting jagged shadows across the blood-stained ground. Driven by pain and honor, Joris locked blades with Abaddon in a clash the likes of which the War Master had not experienced since his duel with Sigismund. Some say the fight lasted mere seconds. Others claim it raged for hours beneath a sky that crackled and burned with the fury of the gods themselves. What is certain is that, despite Joris's unparalleled
My cat's being annoying, wants food.
of his warriors, Abaddon emerged victorious. Imperial records speak of deep scars upon the despoiler's corrupted form that no apothecary could heal. These marks, whispered to be the traces of the Emperor's will through Joris's sword arm, are with Abaddon to this day. They haunt him even as the grim darkness of the 41st millennium draws to an end, a constant reminder of the defiance that had dared to rise against him. When the Death Company had finally fallen, their bodies scattered and lifeless, Abaddon left them undisturbed. Joris and his warriors were not discarded like the others. Abaddon, in his own dark way, honored them. The Death Company warriors were seated upon makeshift thrones, carved from the broken bodies of Black Legion corpses. Their once proud forms, now broken, were arranged as though they were kings in the ruins of their glorious defeat. A final farewell to warriors worthy of the name. In the end, Macan stood as a hollowed husk, scarred not only by the weapons of war, but by the scars of the soul, the echoes of a battle that had torn apart everything in its path, leaving only the faintest trace of defiance in the hearts of the fallen. In the final years of M37, the Blood Angels were a broken force. Their gene seed, desecrated beyond recovery, lay scattered across the blood-soaked dust of Macan. It would take centuries for the Sons of the Angel to recover their strength and rejoin the war across the stars. The Black Legion, bloodied beyond Abaddon's estimation, withdrew to the Eye of Terror, leaving ruin in their wake. Fabius Bile, the twisted apothecary of the Emperor's children, received from Abaddon a tithe of corrupted Blood Angel gene seed, harvested from the dead. With it, Bile would craft horrors to serve the Despoiler's will in campaigns yet to come. Mankind
Fabulous Bile. Another reoccurring theme. That guy don't quit being, a giant dick. I mean, what he did to Vulcan. Ugh.
meanwhile, licked its wounds in silence, for few could bear to speak of the Ghost War's shadow. Of all the Black Crusades, few were so defined by whispers and phantoms, yet so costly in pride and blood. For the first time since the War of the Beast, a chapter bearing the glorious name and legacy of a founding legion had almost ceased to exist. The cemetery world of Hypercitis, orbiting a dead star in the galactic north, became the final resting place for Macan's fallen. Upon its obsidian walls, in ancient fresco and bas-relief, the faces of the mysterious grey-armoured space marines who turned the tide at Midian are still depicted, while the desperate deeds of the Blood Angels are immortalized in all the splendor they deserve. Some claim the Seventh Black Crusade was but a probing strike, a cruel jest before the Despoiler's true designs. Others insist it was a test of the Imperium's vigilance. The truth is locked.
Feels like Abaddon is just doing guerrilla tactics. Just every century or so, he hits a bunch of stuff, then he retreats, comes back again, rinse and repeat, over and over and over. I wouldn't really call him a war master. I just say he's doing hit and run tactics with a lot of guerrilla warfare.
Within the walls of the Inquisition and the madness of those who survived it. What is certain is this: where once stood proud chapters and thriving worlds, now lie dust, silence, and the echo of laughter from the Eye of Terror. More stories from the Warhammer 40k universe are on the way, but in the meantime we are planning to cover the battles of many other fantasy, sci-fi, and space opera universes, so make sure you have subscribed and pressed the bell button. Please consider liking and sharing as it helps immensely, and don't forget to comment. We'll try to read and respond to every comment, as we want to know what you think about this video and which videos you hope to see in the future. This is the Wizards and Warriors channel,
I'm assuming
and
this
we'll
next one should be like the 5th or 6th campaign. Let's see, we're down 4, so 10, 9, 8, 7. 10, 9, 8, 7. Yep, it's going to be the 6th. Yep, the 6th Black Crusade.
178 years after the slaughter at Castle-Tyne, Abaddon returned to blight the worlds of the Imperium once again. The 6th Black Crusade would smash against Imperial defences at a moment of great internecine turmoil. Yet not all was well within the Eye of Terror either. Despite his standing as Warmaster, not every Chaos warband respected the Despoiler, and many rivals arose to challenge his position through the years. The 6th Black Crusade would thus be far smaller in scale to the previous 5, and its aim much less ambitious. This time, Abaddon would bring hell into the Materium in the pursuit of one man's death. Meanwhile, in Westeros, a single death can also change the course of history, something well known to those caught in its chaos.
But yeah, this
chaos
game...
we now invite you to join via our sponsor, Game of Thrones King's Road. This is a new action-adventure RPG set in a richly recreated Westeros, and it's official, with all the locations and characters you know from the TV series. It's an open-world adventure across the fractured continent, in which you'll be building your name and legend through exploration, meeting the many great names of the era, and intense detailed combat. Fight as a knight with precise and calculated attacks, as a sellsword with rugged, destructive aggression, or as an assassin with pure skill and agility. Dodge and counter enemies, learn their patterns, and build out a customizable skill set and gear setup to make your character your own. You can also team up in multiplayer for intense fights against powerful creatures, which, as you can see, leads to epic boss encounters sure to test your skill and build your reputation in Westeros. The game is free to play without any pay-to-win mechanics, and it's coming out on both PC and mobile devices.
Thing, but
it's crossplay
in the books, I know there's a lot more stuff than was shown in the show.
Game across any of them all at once, with classic characters to meet, epic combat to master, and a brand new open world to explore. Game of Thrones King's Road is certainly worth a try. Pre-register now and get early access to the game by following our link in the description. The 6th Black Crusade erupted in 901 M36, emerging in the dark hours of an Imperium already severely weakened. The Age of Apostasy had left mankind divided and vulnerable, setting brother against brother in the worst schism since the Horus Heresy. The monstrous reign of Mad Joj Vandaya had sown chaos and tyranny across the Emperor's realm. Through cunning and absolute ruthlessness, Vandaya had become the first man to hold absolute control over the Administratum and the Ecclesiarchy. In the span of a few short years, his sway over the Imperium was absolute, turning him into the most powerful mortal man to have ever lived. Yet despite his undeniable strength of character, no single unaugmented human could ever hope to rule over a galactic empire like the Emperor once had. Thus, Vandaya's already unstable sanity soon unraveled under the strain of managing close to 1 million inhabited realms. The long dark years of his reign would come to be known as the Reign of Blood, and is regarded as one of the darkest chapters of Imperial history.
Sheesh.
No one was safe from Vandaya's tyranny and religious delusions, and in the span of a few centuries, the insane High Lord would damage the Imperium almost as much as Abaddon himself had. His execution at the hands of Alicia Dominica, the founder of the Adepta Sororitas, would bring some solace across the stars, but the damage was too great. Not long after Vandaya's death, a new destructive era would ensue as a direct result of his reign. The Plague of Unbelief soon began, fracturing the Imperium into yet more warring factions. Civil war spread everywhere, with entire planetary sectors declaring independence or falling into ruin. Where once the light of the Emperor had burned fiercely, now only anarchy and heresy remained.
And this is why Gilliman came back and wiped out most of the rebellions, took control, and said, "Hey, High Lords, yeah, no more for you." Gilliman.
It was therefore no wonder that Chaos chose this moment to attack. The forces of Chaos, long confined to the Eye of Terror, saw their opportunity. Hundreds of lesser warbands, led by petty chiefs, poured forth, striking out against the weakened domains of the Emperor in pursuit of plunder, vengeance, and conquest. For many of them, it was a great opportunity to replenish their stockpiles. Most traitor warbands suffered from terrible supply shortages within the Eye. Dark Mechanicus forges were rare, and only the strongest warbands, like the Black Legion, had control over them. Everyone else would either have to barter from a position of weakness or reave across the galaxy in search of loot. Now the second option had suddenly become much easier. Not one to sit on the sidelines, Abaddon also stirred his forces for war. Unlike the lesser lords of chaos, content with pillage, Abaddon's aims were more subtle. He sought greater dominion over chaos itself, yet to secure his rule, he first had to eliminate his rivals. Daravek had been slain centuries ago during the First Black Crusade, and Talamin had also fallen during the Third. Since then, countless other rivals and obstacles had met their end at the Warmaster's hand. Yet strength invites challenge, and chaos is ever self-destructive. New foes appeared at every
Self-destructive
turn,
is an
the
understatement.
Chaos gods delighting in testing and proving their rebellious and insolent champion. Chief among them was Abaddon's former brother, Drakarth the Sightless, the blind butcher of Aridus 7. Drakarth had once been an unremarkable captain of the Lunar Wolves, and later the Sons of Horus, during the Great Crusade and the Horus Heresy. But after the fall of their Primarch, he had forged his own destiny. Refusing to kneel before Abaddon or his Black Legion, he had led his warriors, the Sons of the Eye, into the Immaterium. From there, they emerged sporadically over centuries to wage war on both loyalists and traitor alike.
It sounds like you're gonna die.
Warbands that had fallen into decay or mindless
You're
bloodshed,
gonna die.
the Sons of the Eye flourished under his rule. They were disciplined, resourceful, and feared. They were also bitter rivals of Abaddon. The Sons of the Eye belonged to the thrice-cursed traitors, a loose confederation of warbands that clung to the old ways of the Legion, like Daravek once had. They refused, one and all, to acknowledge Abaddon as their warmaster. They had once hunted him relentlessly, viewing him as a usurper unworthy of Horus's mantle. Now, however, the tide had turned. Abaddon's Black Legion was ascendant, and the thrice-cursed traitors had become a fading force. Yet Drakarth and his warriors were still defiantly independent. Their iconography, a mutilated Eye of Horus, slashed through to signify their Gene-Father's failures, spoke to their beliefs.
Books?
They despised Abaddon for what they saw as his arrogance and blindness, mirroring the faults that had doomed Horus himself. Still, the Sons of the Eye prospered under Drakarth's command. The Black Legion certainly eclipsed them in strength and manpower, but their own forces and leadership were strong enough to deter open war between the two factions. The inevitable result of a conflict between Drakarth and Abaddon would be the destruction of one warband and the fatal weakening of the other. Drakarth had proven himself a formidable, cunning, and relentless warlord. Slowly but surely, he had battled his way to the top, carving a name for himself alongside his more famous brothers from the Heresy. His hour of glory had been the bloody triumph at the Battle of the Keening Deep. There, Drakarth's reputation had been cemented, and his star had risen to new heights, to the point of threatening more established captains and warlords. The fortress of the Keening Deep lay within the folds of the Eye of Terror. It was the stronghold of a mighty Khornite warband that had taken refuge within its walls after the sundering of the World Eater's Legion. Drakarth thus decided to attack the fortress head-on, keen on proving his martial superiority to mortals and gods alike. The World Eaters had the home advantage, and the wrath of the Blood God to fuel their battle lust. Yet the Sons of the Eye were the inheritors of the Lunar Wolves. Drakarth made use of every stratagem his Gene-Father had perfected over centuries of war across the stars, and slowly wrestled control of the keep from his foes. At the height of the battle, Drakarth made his move. His Gene-Father had become famous across the Imperium for his spear-tip tactic, a lightning drop on the enemy's command center to decapitate his leadership. So it was that Drakarth teleported next to the World Eater's warlord. He would meet his foe head-on, like the gladiators of old Nuceria, and best him at his own game. The Berserker was a mighty foe, but rage alone could not overcome Drakarth's ambition. Too long had he lived in obscurity, too long had he let other figures dictate his life, too long had he stood by while the codes of brotherhood and honor he had bled to defend were trampled in the name of murderless power. Drakarth seized the great demon axe from the Khornate warlord's grasp. With a roar heard by Khorne himself, the son of Horus hefted the weapon and hacked his foe apart for all to see. The remaining berserkers promptly bent the knee to the man who promised to lead them to even greater heights of butchery and bloodletting. The skulls of the defeated Khornate champions had been cast into the soul flames of their own keep in a display of brutal dominance. Yet for all his strength, Drakarth was still a man, and Abaddon had become a master at manipulating the ambitions of his rivals. Drakarth's power was undeniable, but power alone was not enough. For all his strength, he lacked the means to sustain a true war effort. His warband needed weapons, armor, and the machines of war that only the Dark Mechanicum could provide. Yet without access to a corrupted forge world of his own, his forces were reliant on scavenging and plunder. It was a weakness Abaddon had taken note of. Rather than oppose Drakarth's ambitions, the Warmaster extended a hand in calculated camaraderie. Harkening back to their old days as brother legionnaires, Abaddon proposed a joint assault on Arkrith, a loyalist forge world, teeming with the resources.
Let me guess, he'll just abandon him down there.
The prize was vast, The manufactorums of the Adeptus Mechanicus held the means to arm entire armies. More than just spoils, this was an opportunity, a test of their shared purpose. If Dracarth agreed, their warbands would fight as one, a reminder of the brotherhood forged long ago in the fires of the Horus heresy. The Sons of the Eye hesitated, wary of Abaddon's true intentions, but the lure of unrestricted war gear was a temptation they could not ignore. Every day, the Black Legion was getting stronger, while their own forces were stagnating. Even if this was a trap, they had little choice but to accept. Sooner or later, both warbands would need to either come to terms or to blows. If the former happened, so much the better. However, if the latter occurred, it made no sense to wait for Abaddon to get even stronger. The campaign was brutal. For months, the combined forces of the Black Legion and the Sons of the Eye laid waste to Arcreath's defenses. The initial assault shattered the outer defenses within days, but the true struggle began in the depths of the Forge World itself. This time, the forces of Chaos were not facing the mortal soldiers of the Imperial Guard, but the implacable hosts of iron and steel of the Omnissiah. Mechanicus legions, their ranks bolstered by Skitarii and battle servitors, fought with grim determination. Their cybernetic
my guess
minds
is they don't
driven
make
by
it.
cold logic and the ruthless directives of the Omnissiah. Every single Skitarii had been mutilated and broken by the priesthood of Mars into a hideous parody of the mortal form. The tech priests' revulsion for mortal flesh had driven them to alter their servants into the image of the machine god. Their legs had been sliced off and replaced with powerful alloy limb.
In the SCP Foundation, there's a machine god. Wonder if they're taking after that.
That never tired. Their eyelids had been torn off and augmentics grafted over their eyes so that they might always gather data.
But that would be doubtful, considering Warhammer 40k's lore starts way before any SCP stuff.
For blessed Mars. Their lungs had been removed and replaced with rebreathers, allowing them to spread the will of the motive force in any environment. What little remained of their tortured, pallid bodies merged with their augmentics in painful, puckered sores where metal met human tissue. In fact, it was often said within the ranks of the Adeptus Mechanicus that if such a warrior were to be dissected, traces of nearly all elements known to man would be found in its remains. Yet, with every ounce of flesh torn from their ravaged bodies, the soldiers of the Omnissiah had been turned into lethal killing machines. Their loyalty, discipline, and coordination were second only to the transhuman warriors of the Adeptus Astartes. Furthermore, the emotional suppressors built into their circuitry and brains allowed them to face the horrors of chaos with unrivaled determination. The Mechanicus turned entire districts of their vast forge world into kill zones, unleashing macro volley cannons, radium fusillades, and incendiary phosphor weapons in a desperate attempt to stem the tide. Vats of molten metal were overturned to create lethal pools capable of melting
Yeah, but any one of those
while
machinists are no
barely
match for an
understood archaeotech was
Astartes.
unleashed upon the foe with devastating effect. Cohorts of battle automata were roused
Titans?
from their slumber to do battle against Chaos Terminators. At the same time, thousands of menials and slaves underwent emergency servitor augmentation and were thrown at the enemy. None of it worked. Against the relentless onslaught of chaos, the best the Mechanicus could do was delay the inevitable. The towering ziggurats of Arcreath, irreplaceable and massive structures, designed with half-forgotten technology to contain the volatile energy of the planet's plasma reactors, became the final battleground. Their spire-like cores pulsed with dangerous energy, casting eerie glows across the battlefield as the Chaos Horde breached their outer defenses. Within the labyrinthine halls of these cathedrals of industry, the battle turned into a war of attrition. Traitor Astartes clashed with cybernetic tech priests in brutal close-quarters combat, chain axes rending through augmetic limbs, and power swords carving through adamantium plating. The once sterile corridors of the Forge World were painted in a mixture of blood and sacred oils, and the dying prayers of the tech priests drowned beneath the roars of the Despoilers' warbands. Abaddon and Dracarth fought side by side, as they had in days long past, their blades carving through the foe with devastating efficiency.
But it has
The
come for
Warmaster
chaos.
of Chaos was an unrelenting force,
for them
the Talon
to
of Horus
betray
shearing
each
through
other.
Skitarii ranks like a scythe through wheat. Each sweep of his accursed sword left only ruin in its wake, a brutal reminder of the first battles of the Long War when the Black Legion had shaken the foundations of the Imperium itself. Dracarth, Lord of the Sons of the Eye, matched his fury with his own ruthless precision, his demon axe crackling with baleful energy as he tore apart the Omnissiah's chosen. His movements were calculated, a dance of death, refined over centuries of warfare, the echoes of his legion's past glories guiding his strikes. He was no mere butcher, but a craftsman of death, a remnant of an age when the 16th Legion had been among the Emperor's finest. During those long months of struggle, they fought not as rivals, but as brothers in arms, a glorious reflection of an age long gone. The battlefields of Arkrith bore witness to their slaughter, their forces advancing side by side in brutal concert. Where Abaddon struck with unrelenting fury, Dracarth moved with honed precision, a duelist amidst the carnage. Their blades sang in unison, a grim chorus to the ruin of the Mechanicum's defenders. To the Sons of the Eye, it was a moment of vindication, proof that the blood of the true lunar wolves had not been diluted by the treacheries of the past. For warriors like Dracarth, who still clung to the old ways instilled in them by their long-lost Genefather, this moment was worth any price to pay. Yet beneath the brotherhood and shared bloodshed, something darker was at play. Even as the battle raged, Abaddon worked in the shadows. He whispered to Dracarth's champions, sowing doubt with carefully chosen words, stoking the embers of ambition and mistrust. He did not command or threaten. Such crude methods had their place, but not here. Instead, he offered them power, visions of greater glories, of ascension beyond the chains of their warlord. He reminded them of what they could become, of what they deserved. The Warmaster spoke not as a tyrant, but as a brother, painting images of an empire of their own, where no master would chain their ambitions. Some resisted, bound by loyalty or fear, but others listened, and in listening they began to question. The cracks within the Sons of the Eye began as murmurs, whispered discussions between battles, lingering glances exchanged in the heat of combat, a hesitation before obeying Dracarth's command, a moment's consideration where once there had been only instinctive obedience. Then, as Abaddon had planned, the descent festered. Warriors, once bound by oath and blood, began to question their loyalties, to wonder if Dracarth's plan of sentimental conservatism was truly their own. Did he lead them to glory, or merely drag them in his wake? Had they followed him out of faith, or merely because there had been no other choice? One by one, the seeds of doubt took root, and as the war raged on, Dracarth was becoming the master of a legion already slipping from his grasp. As the final battle drew to a close and Arkrith burned, the warlords gathered to celebrate their triumph. Dracarth, blinded by nostalgia and drunk on victory, had failed to see the trap laid at his feet. As he stood shoulder to shoulder with his Gene brother, their warriors arrayed before them, no doubt the former Lunar Wolf thought of the triumph at Ulanor. There, the ideals of the Great Crusade had burned brighter than ever. There, the Lunar Wolves and their Primarch Horus had been honored more than anyone in the history of the Imperium. There, brothers stood alongside each other in absolute unity, their shared trials and tribulations creating a bond that went unsaid and seemed so unbreakable. It was then that Abaddon struck. In one swift motion, he turned upon Dracarth, impaling him upon the talon of Horus. The massive lightning claw tore through ceramite and flesh, lifting the sightless one from the ground in a gruesome display of dominance. Dracarth did not die immediately. He hung there, bleeding, his lifeblood pooling at his feet, as his warriors, his sworn brothers, knelt before Abaddon. One by one, they pledged their allegiance, their oaths of loyalty drowning out Dracarth's gasping breaths. The last thing he saw before death claimed him was the total submission of his once proud warband and the destruction of his ideals. Only then did Abaddon finish the deed, executing him in a violent ritual that cemented his rule and the death of the old ways. The Sixth Black Crusade had accomplished its purpose. Dracarth the Sightless was dead, his warband broken, his legacy erased. With the absorption of the Sons of the Eye, Abaddon's Black Legion grew ever stronger, their ranks swelling with new warriors, their arsenals enriched by the spoils of Arkrith. The repercussions of Dracarth's death spread far beyond his own warband. The remaining factions of the thrice-cursed traitors, long defiant, now faced a grim choice: bend the knee or be destroyed. Many fled deep into the Eye of Terror, unwilling to suffer Dracarth's fate. Others, seeing the inevitability of Abaddon's ascendance, swore fealty, bringing their strength to the Black Legion. With each victory, Abaddon's claim to the title of Warmaster grew undeniable. Though the Imperium remained largely ignorant of the Sixth Black Crusade's significance, its consequences would ripple through history. It was not just a battle, it was a statement. Abaddon had proven once again that resistance was futile, that he would suffer no rivals, that his
We are Borg. Resistance is futile. So many classic lines from so many sci-fi shows just carry over from other things.
rule over the forces of chaos was absolute. And as the fires of Arkreath smoldered, the galaxy braced for the wars yet to come. To see how those wars unfold, make sure you are subscribed and have
Still, to
pressed the bell
stab him
button
so
to see them.
quickly.
Please consider
Sheesh.
liking, commenting, and sharing.
I would have thought he
It
was
helps
dead.
immensely. Our videos
Just
would be
not.
impossible without our kind patrons and YouTube channel members, whose ranks you can join via the links in the description to learn about our schedule, get early access to our videos, access our Discord, and much more. This is the Wizards and Warriors channel, and we will catch you on the next one.
All right, I'm going to stop the stream here. For some reason, my body is telling me you need a nap. I don't know why. I rested for 8 hours, which is something I don't usually do. But for some reason, I need a nap. So I'm going to go ahead and take it. Thanks for stopping by. And if you guys enjoy this content, stop on by for the next live stream. I do them daily now, Monday through Sunday.